Hey everybody, it is here, it is time, it is just about the first Saturday in May, and I give a happy Kentucky Derby greeting to my family here in WPT Nation, good old West Point Nation. Hope everybody's doing well out there. Christine and I got to Louisville late Wednesday, well, relatively late Wednesday afternoon. We've settled in, had a great Thursday morning with bunch of partners and getting to see the Derby and Oaks horses train. Obviously, Jace's Road was a highlight and seeing so many familiar faces. So, yeah, obviously looking forward to the next few days here in Louisville. And it's a big weekend for the stable. I mean, not only having a bunch of horses in Friday and Saturday at Churchill, but Thursday, today as I tape this, is opening day at Belmont. That was hands down when I was in New York. I mean, from my high school years on, opening day at Belmont was hands down one of my absolute favorite racing days on the entire calendar. And we've got QF 75 running there. And again, horses scattered all over the country. So best of luck to the black and gold. And why don't we dive into the Derby? I think just in terms of trying to keep this neat, and as many of you know, brevity is not a strong suit of mine. I think I'll do a standalone Derby, a standalone Oaks, and then regarding the rest of the West Point horses, I'll put them all together in another video, a third video, just again to try to keep things a little neater and cleaner. This is a wide open Derby. You know, heading through the prep season, clearly Forte was always the horse that had the target on his back and was a more than deserving number one spot. And he will indeed go favored on Saturday. I mean, barring anything out of the unusual happening. Um, I'm anxious to see the spread between Forte and Tapit Trice. I know they're 3-1 and 5-1 in the program in Churchill's program on the morning line. Part of me thinks it could get pretty close, but no doubt Forte, by virtue of his 2-year-old campaign, which was as good as it gets, and his overall form, which is phenomenal. I mean, he is the starting point, and I think by extension the Florida Derby, which I've got mixed feelings about. Forte won the race. Turning for home, I thought he was beat. Far turn run, thought he was beat, and he somehow was able to get by Mage in deep stretch. You know, part of me looks at that race and says, you know, Todd Pletcher knew this horse was going to be a prohibitive favorite. It was designed as his second race to get him to Churchill Downs for the Derby, and was, even though it was another grade one and a big seven-figure purse, was it a race Forte was clearly fully cranked. I'd like to think there's more in the tank and a forward move, and those are all positives, and all positives on top of a horse again whose record and talent and ability speaks for itself. On the flip side, though, I think clearly, and I know I'm not alone saying this, so it's not like I'm going out on a limb or I'm about to say something you haven't thought perhaps or you haven't heard before. He's going to have to run better come Saturday afternoon at 7 p.m. that he did at Gulfstream Park. And, you know, there's a large part of me that wonders if Mage was indeed the best horse on the day. I know Forte had that outside post 11 to 12, that was talked about heavily and going back to the Big Brown Florida Derby, and he overcame it. But there's no doubt in my mind that Mage ran the best race that day, even though he was second best, because he broke so slow. And I know what Louis was certainly thinking on the far turn run when he tried to just get up and by Forte and leave him in his dust, which he did. And not many horses get past to the extent that Forte got past and was had his doors blown off. I mean, it's like, you know, you're driving in the middle lane and somebody comes by in the left lane doing 95. I mean, that was what it looked like. And Forte, to his credit, was still able to reel in Mage. But when you consider that big run from Mage and the fact that it was only his third start, that was a really, really big effort. And I got to tell you, though, for a horse like Mage that has a ton of talent, the fact that he did not run until late January of his 2-year-old season and only has a 3 lifetime starts, even though he's very gifted. Those are two glaring negatives in my mind. And I will say and wrap up about Forte, who's an easy route. I mean, many of Mike Rapoli has been a long time, a very close friend of mine, and I've talked at length at times, the impact Mike has had on my life. So between Forte and Jace's Road, in my heart and soul, I have two very, very big routes in this race. I just don't think he's got a large. It's a very slim margin for error, and I think he's potentially a vulnerable favorite here. Last thing on Forte, I do like how shifty and nimble he is. I mean, he almost again the moves that he can make, that nimble like just that nimble like action that he's got. He's almost I had a Honda Prelude, which a couple of cars back from me, greatest car I ever owned. He reminds me of driving my Prelude on the highway when no one was around. I mean, just sleek and can giddy up and go. That will serve him well. But again, I just think he's got to do better than he did over the winter down at Gulfstream Park. We'll see if he's up to the task. Moving on to Todd's other horse, Tappet Trice, who, if I was in my old job of doing one, two, threes, or in the case of the Derby, maybe one, two, three, four, fives, I think I'm leaning towards picking him on top. Again, his record, the pedigree, all this stuff speaks for itself. But what really won me over, and it was something even watching replays to get prepped for this podcast last night. I even said to Christina watching the Bluegrass again, I was like, wow, I really, really like this horse's Bluegrass. And he did pretty much nothing right on March 11th in the Tampa Bay Derby, but was just the classiest horse in the race and still won, and won going away with a big late run. The horse we saw a few weeks later on April 8th at Keeneland with Tappet Trice, to me, was just a far more polished gem of an effort and racehorse, where he was way more even. He didn't fall out the back, and he was actually able to make a couple of different moves to get himself into contention. It was like Louis moved him early, and then Tappet Trice was able to shut himself down, get in a rhythm. Louis moved him again, and from that point on, it was just that sustained, steady run with the horse, who was obviously very determined in game and putting away Verifying. I don't think he's as I don't think he's as cat-like per se as Forte. Talking about Forte, like my old beloved Honda Prelude, Tappa Trice to me is more like driving a tractor trailer. If he gets stopped, that may be the end of his race. And ultimately, in a 20 horse field, you're going to need a lot of racing luck. But in terms of that progression from the Tampa race into the Keeneland race to now, I really, really like that step forward, and like what I saw quite a bit with a real chug along type of horse who, as he stretches out and goes a mile and a quarter, I gotta think going 10 here at Churchill will be up his alley. So I'm a Forte fan, and he's an easy route, but I do, again, doing picks. I think Tappet Trice is my top selection in the 2023 Kentucky Derby. Verifying, don't like that post. I mean, these two horses, I tried to make a case, speaking of I'll cover the three inside posts at that. But I wanted to like Hit Show. I do. And I am, again, having been a native New Yorker, and still to this day in my adult life, I've spent more time at Aqueduct Racetrack outside of being home than probably anywhere else. So I have a soft spot for the Big A and the Wood Memorial. The Wood, though, over the last, I don't know how many years, it's been quite a while, much to my dissatisfaction, has not been a key Kentucky Derby prep. This horse ran very well, though, with a wide trip, and was very game and determined. I wonder about the overall quality. I mean, Lord Miles, kind of ridiculous with him winning at 60-1, and Dreamlike's very talented, but he's a maiden. I mean, you nearly had a horse that was 0 for 2 win the Wood, so I like the effort on the surface. I just don't know about the Wood Memorial. Verifying looks interesting, and that brings us to the pace in this race, which isn't really cut and dried on paper. The Timeform US pace figures that I've mentioned before, doing some of these podcasts, which I like their pace figures a lot. I mean, they've got and we cannot put Blue when it comes to speed and pace. I mean, they've got him up close, obviously, right off of Confidence Game. We'll see if he shows as much speed as Timeform US thinks he's going to. And towards the outside, the Japanese horse, Derma Sotogaki. Will he be a horse that shows big early speed? But Verifying is likely going to be in that first flight at a price. I think you could do a lot worse. And if I was playing exactors or tries, he's a horse I would definitely use. This Two Fills is a neat horse, a horse you'd love to own, solid on the dirt. But really, I mean, if you put your thumb over the Turfway race last time out on the synthetic, on the Tapeta or Polytrack at Turfway Park, I mean, this is a horse that would be a very, very big price. So, neat horse. It's good seeing some new faces in the Derby. I mean, this trainer and jockey in particular, that's what this is all about. But I'm not a Two Fills fan, even though he's got that crazy, crazy fast number. Just because I think he's probably a horse best on synth or perhaps even on the grass. I'm a Keith DeSormo fan. Doing a few of these in the prep season leading up to the big dance on the first Saturday in May. I've often, when I talk about Keith DeSormo, mention his eye for picking up talented horses for not much money at the sales. But man, he has got a very long layoff going in. And again, the race that kind of made this horse, or at least gave him enough qualifying points, was run over a sloppy racetrack, a race in which Verifying had quite a bit of trouble. So if you like Confidence Game, again, he could be a long shot that, if you were playing tries or supers, you might try to sneak in. But in terms of winning the race, he's not really my style. Same goes for Kingsbarns. He's another. And I mean, outside of Justify, you've got a lot of history and a lot of precedent of horses that did not run as 2-year-olds not getting it done in the Kentucky Derby. So he's got a lot of history against him. And, one of my, not really a knock, but it's just obviously a conversation piece with Mage was the fact that he only had the 3 races. And even though he's an Uncle Mo Tappet that is very talented and beat our guy last time out at Fairgrounds, just not enough experience. The 2-year-old, the non-racing as a 2-year-old worries me. And, he's not gonna get, in all likelihood, this comfortable pace that he did last time out. If you could do it over again, you would have loved to have seen a more aggressive ride on Jace's Row, but a moot point. We got to the Derby, and again, I don't think there's going to be any free lunches up top here with Kingsbarns. A Reincarnate might be a horse that at least early on, puts his hat into the ring for a little bit, shows speed for a half or 3/4. Tough to make him. In fact, I'll get to Angel of Empire, who was really good in the Arkansas Derby. But watching that race again, there's nobody else I'd want out of there than the winner, Angel of Empire, who was just in a different area code. Skinner's a horse, and much like the Florida Derby, where I have mixed feelings, and I hope this doesn't sound like, I'm like walking on the fence post, and it's like, well, decide one way or another. Do you like the race or don't you like the race? And so I don't want it to sound wishy-washy. It's just my honest take. Like with the Florida Derby, I get both sides. Like with Forte, like he won, he had the bad post and looked like he was beat, but still finished up and gave the impression as he cut down Mage that he was a horse that wouldn't mind the extra distance. But on the flip side, you go, well, that visually wasn't a great effort. And if he runs like that on Saturday, he's probably not in the hunt for the win. And that's kind of, my same feeling with the Santa Anita Derby. I get both sides of the coin here with this horse, where race came up fast, in terms of Practical Move, and I'll talk more about Practical Move when I move on to his onto his cut. But in regards to Skinner, as I went off on that tangent, he's another like plotter that, I mean, similar. He might be a similar price to Verifying, even though that one's probably a little short. Or maybe Confidence Game's a better comparison with Skinner, just in terms of like two parallels. Two different horses, naturally, but in terms of price, they might be relatively close on the board. Skinner, just I don't think he's good enough to win. And these races, just kind of like, not that he really sucked up for third. I mean, he had dead aim and just kind of hung on getting by Practical Move and Mandarin Hero. But this could be a horse that just kind of drops back, cranks up with that run, and as many horses start to tire beyond the quarter pole in the home stretch that just can't get the distance and don't want the distance and or aren't good enough, could see Skinner clunking along and getting a piece. And depending upon how things break, he could be a horse that makes your try or your super. So he looked like an interesting little plotter to me. I don't think he's not a horse that I'd be interested in betting, to win or anything like that. But I do think, again, if you're looking for somebody to suck up and get a minor award at a good price, it's him. Practical Move, his neighbor actually, and they were neighbors in the Santa Anita Derby in a pitched battle down to the wire. They'll renew their rivalry off the San Felipe and the Santa Anita Derby. Practical Move beat a couple of our 2 year olds last fall out on the West Coast, and I mean it's hard to argue with this colt, his record. At least on Bayer, I mean, he's got two of the fastest figures consistently, pairing them up in the race, which is a good thing. And the job Tim Yaktine has done with him. Again, I know he's got some of the Baffert horses currently, but this horse started with Yaktine, so it's just good to see some newer faces on the scene. And picking apart the Santa Anita Derby, there's things I like and there's things that I question. I will say Practical Move looks like a jockey's dream to me, where he's just got that high cruising speed where he can put you in the race, he can get up close, he can take the kickback, he can settle and just turn himself off while sitting in behind horses until it's time to go. And judging from that inside run, and it was probably a run, it was at least a quarter mile, if not longer, from the top of the far turn until he pretty much assumed command at the top of the stretch. Being able to just rally inside of horses and not blink and not hesitate and not idle, I thought that was a real positive check mark here for Practical Move, where you want horses in a 20 horse field in a race that is kind of its own animal. You want horses that can run through trouble and can kind of just pick themselves up in a couple of jumps and can get out of a bad spot. I think he's got that. Then on the flip side, for his the exploits and the things I like out of his Santa Anita Derby, I just with these three horses stacked on top of each other coming down to the wire, that soured me just a little bit, that it was basically a three-horse blanket finish and a three-horse like dogfight through the entire stretch. And it along those lines, it makes me in a way question the over. And I don't want to be too hard. All three of them, those three horses that were in the try, they're very talented 3 year olds. I just wonder, moving on to Saturday and what awaits, in terms of quality, if this is just going to be a completely different scenario, and certainly it's going to be a tougher field. So there's things I like with Practical Move. There's things that I don't like so much. And although he is by a horse that should have won and certainly could have won the Kentucky Derby as far as the dam sire goes in a Fleet Alex, you know, do you wonder? Just, and I know he's gone 9. I know he's already won going a mile and a furlong, but that was back home at Santa Anita. Can he go a mile and a quarter in this race on Saturday? Being by a stallion that I think typically is going to throw horses that like to sprint slash mile. So a concern there with the Practical Joke, who I love. Huge, huge, huge Practical Joke fan, and I absolutely love that filly we just picked up. She was hip 1205, and there's some of her left. There's some availability if you want to check her out. She'll go to Shug McGahee. Last horse we bought in the waning moments of the OBS April sale. So good luck to Practical Move. Neat horse, different ball game though for him and even Skinner naturally on Saturday. Disarm saw him train this morning. He wasn't far behind Jace's Road, as as the Derby horses gallop by. I was mad at him for quite some time with him just barely getting third and for a time being knocking Jace's Road, I should say, out of the top 20. But it all worked out in the end. He's going to have to fire the best race of his career. But again, he could be a horse if you're into playing, tries or supers in the Derby, like many people are, and you've got for me, a horse like Tapit Trice that I like on top. And even if you wanted to use three horses, say, by three horses that, three horses you like the most, maybe first or second, and have like a pretty big spread for third and fourth, he's one I could consider using trying to beef up the exotics on the bottom side, but I don't think he's good enough to win. And then we come up to my boy here, Jace's Road, and who I wish obviously all the best luck in the world. And certainly there's quite a bit of just pride. I mean, and this is me talking, but the fact that this is West Point's seventh Kentucky Derby starter. I mean, naturally, we're hoping to get another. Be great to win another Derby to put right next door to Always Dreaming 6 years ago in 2017, and we'll see how Jace's Road does. There is I mean, and clearly he's a huge long shot and deserves to be. His gun runner was good, and then he had the sloppy track race, Chase and Arabian Night, and then he ran pretty well on a day. And I failed to mention this a few moments back talking about Kings Barnes. I think there were 4 or 5 wire-to-wire winners where inside speed was really good on Louisiana Derby Day at Fairgrounds over the dirt. So you might argue, in fact, that would be a stance I would take here, that this horse was up against it, chasing outside over a track that was very kind to the inside. Can he go a mile and a quarter? There's other speed in the race. Those questions need to be answered, and he's going to be a bomb. But proud of him for getting here, and he's a horse with a lot of talent. And look, I hope he turns for home with the lead and is able to still have that lead when they hit the finish line. But I'm excited for not only Saturday with Jace's Road, but moving ahead. And ultimately, we'll see where the chips fall. But he could be a horse I've long sort of had in the back of my mind, might be just like a powerhouse 7/8 to a mile horse, but he can also stretch out. So I'm just curious, trying to keep it condensed here. I'm just curious to see and naturally rooting for Jace's Road and to see how he does. But I'm also in my mind wondering, like, oh, where, if it doesn't work out on Saturday, where might we go? What could be some options, or what route might we point this Colt by Quality Road? Or I remember taking a selfie with when we bought him as a yearling in September of 2021. Sun Thunder, no thanks. Last 2 races have been pretty lackluster. So we obviously, West Point owns Jace's Road in partnership with the Outlaws. They're obviously great partners, or we wouldn't partner with them on so many horses. And good luck to them. I mean, Jace's Road naturally is going to be an outsider, but they've got a real chance here to win their first Kentucky Derby with Angel of Empire, who, in terms of what he's beat, these are. And typically the Oaklawn races, or even he ran once at Fairgrounds and then Oaklawn. But I think this will work. This works well for Fairgrounds or Oaklawn. Well, especially Oaklawn. The Oaklawn races over the last 20 years, even going back to Smarty Jones, American Pharoah. I mean, they've had some awesome, high level 3-year-olds either prep or winter in Arkansas and then come to Churchill and do very well in the Derby and the Triple Crown races. I don't think there was a lot in the wake of Angel of Empire. But similarly to a Tapit Trice, this horse to me, and looking at Tapit Trice's Bluegrass, this horse to me looked like the complete package last time out, just with that steady, and it was really impressive. Like, once he was asked for run by Pratt, he got his feet beneath him, and from like the half-mile pole, it was just that steady, wide advance, and by the time, they kind of turned for home, he just blew the race apart. Really dangerous horse, and a running style to me that, in my mind, works really well at Churchill. He might lie in terms of just his handiness, maybe somewhere between Forte and Tapit Trice. I think he's a little handier than Tapit Trice, and maybe not as like push button as Forte, but I think there's a lot to like with this horse's running style and the fact that he is just, you know, I'll make some arrows going up. It looks like he's just heading in the right direction. Really, really dangerous horse. Raise Kane won the Gotham. We had trounced him back in the gun runner with Jace's Road. No thanks. I understand, and it's cool on a bunch of levels, and I understand, from a business perspective with the Japanese horse, and that opens up Asia to, simulcast this race and foreign money coming in, which is clearly a big deal. And there's no doubt about it. We have seen on a global universal scale, the Japanese over the last few years, they are showing up to races that they rarely showed up in, and they're not only showing up, but they're dominating and winning. Still, I think the Derby, as I've repeated or at least mentioned multiple times, this is, as great as a Breeders' Cup race is, even a 14 horse Breeders' Cup that's a full field. This is a different ball game, and I'm glad he's here. I'm anxious to see how he runs, but if Derma Sotogake wins this race, it's going to be on me. Just, you know, Japan, when Sheikh Mohammed was bringing his horses over from Dubai chasing this race. I know his horses now, by and large, are Americanized and they're American horses, so it's different. But back when he was, running a lot of his horses in the UA Derby and wanted to win a race at Nat Al Sheba and then come over here and win the Derby, it was always good. Like, I was always like, no, when Godolphin wins with a foreign horse, that I'll tip my hat to them, but it's going to be on me, and I feel the same about this son of Mind Your Biscuits. But cool to see him in the race, and if you haven't, as a quick aside, see if you can hop on Twitter or online, and the trainer at there must have been a dinner or cocktail party the other night. A jet lagged and, as they said, drunk trainer was up. He seems like a really colorful dude. So good luck to that horse, but he's not for me. Rocket Can, I thought was a vulnerable favorite in Arkansas. By and large, I didn't like the horses that Forte had beaten in the Fountain of Youth, Cyclone Mischief included, and there was really nothing in the Holy Bull behind this horse. So didn't run horribly, but again, he's not for me. There's other horses like Skinner, Confidence Game, even Disarm. There's other horses that are big prices that I would have personally more interest in, even though I'm a huge Bill Mott fan. Already talked about the Wood. I don't know what to make of Lord Miles. On a positive note, I don't know what to make of it because, I mean, fine, he was third in a very soft rendition of the Mucho Macho Man on New Year's Day. Did not run well behind Rocket Can. Did not run well in the Tampa Bay Derby. I guess didn't run horribly there. And then he's 60-1 in the Wood Memorial. And it was one of those, not ugly, but clearly, I mean, with the three of them, Lord Miles, Hit Show, and Dream like drunken sailors banging on one another coming down to the wire. That was not a visually pleasing Wood Memorial. So again, Lord Miles not for me. And then you've got the other Japanese horse, Continuar, on the outside, who's going to be a gazillion to one. So again, recapping the Derby, I'm going to take Tapatrice for the win. Good luck to Forte and Jace's Road. And prices that I would use, again, fooling around in exactas or anything like that. You've got Hit Show. Don't love the Wood. If I want anybody out of the Wood, it's going to be him. There's only two horses to choose from, but I like him way more than Lord Miles. Verifying I could use. A Confidence Game. Again, these are just bombs I would consider using underneath. Skinner. Practical move. I mean, he's not really a bomb, but at a comparable price, I way prefer Angel of Empire. Good luck to Jace's. Yeah, Disarm, who I mentioned, might clunk up for a piece. And that's pretty much how I see the Kentucky Derby. It's a wide open race. Here's to a great Derby 149 and safe racing. Safe racing throughout the weekend here at Churchill Downs. That's all I ask for. I want to see great racing and safe racing. Want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening. Hope you have a great Kentucky Derby. Check out the 2-year-olds. If you haven't looked at what West Point purchased at the April sale down at OBS in Ocala, give a look to the new 2-year-olds. It's an awesome class, and I'm already dreaming about being back here with all of them, in fact, in about a year's time. And again, like I was saying, I hope everybody has a great Derby. Thanks so much, everybody.